Okay, so we're back and we're talking about linear equations. So we're getting into linear functions. Now we're going to get into sort of the meat of what a linear function is. Last week, the things we talked about were function notation and functions and stuff like that. Those are general things that we'll use throughout the year. This specifically has to do with this 9 weeks. So we're talking about linear equations. I'm sure you've seen this in a math class before, Algebra 1. But we're going to touch on it real quick and make sure you understand it, and then we'll move on. All right. So with linear equations, there's several different forms, and we'll learn the different forms as we move along. But the most common form for a linear function or a linear equation is the slope-intercept form. All right, and that is probably the top one is the way you've seen it in the past, I'm sure. Y is equal to mx plus b. In your calculator, it's y is equal to ax plus b, so you might have seen it a couple different ways. Now we're putting our function notation in here. So this is what it would look like with function notation. It would be f of x is equal to mx plus b. Notice that the m, I don't know why they use m for slope, but they do. M is slope, so that's going to be the steepness of the line. All right, b is going to be the y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis. And then x and y, or x and f of x, depending on how you write it, those are your coordinate points. X is input, y is output. All right, so that's the slope-intercept form. We'll see what that looks like more when we put numbers in. Typically, what you'll have is you'll have a number for m and a number for b, and then your x and y are the x's, remember, are things that you choose, and then y is the output for that. All right, so that's the slope-intercept form. It's helpful to see what slope is. Slope is sort of the steepness of a line. It can be flat, that would be zero slope. It can rise, and then straight up and down would be an undefined slope. So it can go from zero to undefined and everything in between. Slope, how we calculate slope in the general form, and there's a couple other ways we'll do that as we move along, but the general form is right here. M is equal to the rise over the run. The rise is the change in the distance in the y direction between point to point, and the run is the change in the x direction. Notice, to find the slope, you pick points on this line, pick any 2 points, and then you'll find that how far you had to rise to get to the next point, and then how far you had to go right or left to get to the next point, and then you'll put the rise over the run. Another way they will call slope is this word right here, rate of change. Anytime you see the words rate of change, it's a good bet that they're talking about slope. All right, so that slope, it's just a measure of the steepness of the line, and it's what we're calling m in our slope-intercept form. The y-intercept, that is where this line crosses the y-axis. Remember, the y-axis is this up and down axis. So where this line crosses that axis is we call the y-intercept. And for whatever reason, they use the letter b to denote that. So in our little general form over here, the b represents the y-coordinate of the y-intercept. Basically, if you think about this, a y-intercept, notice if you were going to write it as a coordinate, it's where x is equal to 0, right? To be on this line, you can't have a number for x because x takes you right or left. So x has to be 0, and then our b is our y-coordinate. So you may see the y-intercept written like this as well, with the x-coordinate 0 and then some number. If x is 0 and you have some number, that's where it's crossing the y-axis. Okay? And since x is 0, you can find the y-intercept by plugging in 0 and solving for b, or solving. So if you plug in 0 for x here, 2 times 0 plus 5. So what you have is y is equal to 5. Okay? So your y-intercept then, for this particular equation, is at the point 0, 5. Okay? So those are just a few things about linear equations. Take some time, copy this all into your notebook. If you have any questions, bring them to class.